Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, episode 27. Today's guest is Andy Ellis. He's a longtime activist and organizer seeking the Green Party nomination for Maryland governor, and he's pushing for bold, bottom-up changes. Three men, three different perspectives, and a civil, interesting conversation focused on common ground. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And today we have a very special guest. We have Andy Ellis, who is seeking the party's nomination from the Green Party for the gubernatorial position, the governor of Maryland. Andy is a longtime community activist. He's a champion of grassroots democracy, and he's a critic of corporate influences in politics. Andy, is there anything else you'd like to add about yourself before we get started?
No, that's a great introduction. Mark and Ethan, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to get to talk to you about Maryland politics and whatever else we get into.
Yeah, it's great to see you and glad to have you. So, Andy, your campaign emphasizes community democracy. What does that look like in practical terms for Marylanders? And how does your will your administration shift the power closer to the people?
Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about what it looks like right now. Right now in Maryland, we have a General Assembly in Annapolis that has been controlled by Democrats almost every year since 1866. And at this point, they have a supermajority, a several vote supermajority, which means that they can override any veto, even that the governor makes. And then they draw the district lines and gerrymander them in order to protect that supermajority and to keep things in place. So what we end up with is a whole bunch of people who have a state government that is not the least bit responsive to them, because those folks, frankly, don't need voters. They need donors, party bosses, and national narratives. And so I think that's a real problem, and I think it helps explain a lot of what is broken about Maryland, and I think we need to fix it. So one of the things that we're going to do, one of the things that my administration would do is we would make a big push for citizen initiative. We think there needs to be an ability for people to go out there, get signatures on a petition, get something on the ballot, and even if the General Assembly and the governor don't want to do it, put it in front of the voters so the voters have a say on that. And I look, I know the Democrats in Annapolis are not going to be happy with me if I come in and I'm the next governor and I say, well, what we're going to do is start taking your power away. So we're going to have to work on how to get that passed. But I got some ideas about that and making sure that we can have that process. The next thing is making sure that our party system, which is really sorted into a bunch of one-party jurisdictions for the most part across the state, has more voices in it, has more people that feel represented, and have more ways for multiple parties to exist. And then we're going to take on the primaries, which I think excludes so many voters who are not diehards of one party or the other from being able to participate. We can get into each of those, but for me, the problem is Democrat supermajority in Annapolis that makes sure that they're the only ones who get to make decisions, and people who don't feel responsiveness from any of their electorates.
We did a previous podcast on the blueprint for Maryland, which was vetoed by the governor, yet the supermajority was able to push that through, and now we're in a $6 billion deficit, largely as a result of that legislation. Yeah. So we agree with you. That supermajority is really not serving the citizens of Maryland well.
And I think it's quite no. I think it's very clear at this point in time, to your point, that when one party, regardless of whether you personally disagree with that party, but when one party has that much control, it is not good for the people. Competition is good. And right. So when you talk about, say, the open primary, what do you mean in that regards?
So, I think there's a whole lot of different ways that people talk about open primaries. And I don't like there's this one that is we're going to do everybody's going to compete in the primary. And then the winners of that go on to the general election and compete there. I don't really like that method as a way of doing state party work. It may work in certain jurisdictions. I live in Baltimore City, and I think it wouldn't be terrible here if we had that kind of system. But at the state level, what I mean by open primary is that anybody of any affiliation an independent or a third party that is excluded from the primary can go on primary day and at least pull a ballot without having to change their registration.
And so, just to make sure I understand, if we had the third party primaries, like you're saying, what would happen is someone who's an independent, they would go in and they would get to choose as to whether or not they are going to vote on the Republican ballot or vote on the Democrat ballot.
Yeah.
And I believe there's quite a few states that do that currently. Like, it's something that is not unheard of by any means.
No, it's not uncommon by any means.
And of course, something you mentioned more than once is the money, right? The big money that is involved in politics. What it's been going on for a long time. There was a seminal Supreme Court decision a couple decades ago that allowed even more big money to come into politics. What is your solution to that?
I mean, the short-term solution is to expand public financing, and to expand public financing to state delegate races. Right now, there's public financing for the governor's race, but there isn't for the attorney general, there isn't for the comptroller, and there isn't for the state races. And so I think the short-term solution is to expand that public financing. It doesn't allow somebody to compete. Like, public financing will not allow me to compete with tech billionaires maxing out their donations to Wes Moore, but it will allow me to have a team. It will allow me to reach voters. It doesn't level the playing field, but it raises the bar of competitors to be able to have some ground to stand on and build some kind of campaign infrastructure. Either of the two parties are going to repeal Citizens United and make it so that the dark money can't flow into politics. So I think we're so far away from a place where that gets repealed, and I don't think it's going to happen at the state level. I think the first thing that we have to really do is allow that public financing mechanism to be expanded to everybody. I was on a forum that the Forward Party put on a couple of weeks ago. And Delegate Hornberger was there, and he was sort of saying, look, if we're going to have public financing for some races, we should have it for all races, so that you don't just get to qualify for it if you happen to be in one of the counties that has it or running for governor, but that we have it across the board. So, I mean, I think that's the first and most important step, is to do that. I also think another step is, again, citizen initiative. I think helps to challenge the power of money in politics, because it allows people who don't like what their representatives are voting on to propose their own things and run their own campaigns in order to be able to do it. And if we want to restructure the way the government works, I think we have to have that citizen initiative, because I don't think we can rely on the two parties to restructure the current system.
So you talked about moving away from corporate influence in politics, and I happen to agree with you on that, by the way. But how would you realistically govern and fund state initiatives in a system that's still heavily shaped by these forces?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so public financing right now for the governor's race is paid for by fines and fees that come for people who do their campaign finances wrong. They've started enforcing more strictly in the last couple of years, and they've been able to create this pool of money. I think there are some innovative ideas about, taxing PAC donations to pay for things like that, and some of those type of things that we could explore, that some states are looking into and some localities are looking into. But really, I think giving enough of a platform for the folks that want to campaign against the money to be able to have something to stand on via public financing really opens the door to start having this conversation. Right now, we can't really have it because the folks that are against money in politics, for the most part, don't have the money to be in politics. Is expanding those public financing programs so more candidates have an opportunity to run clean elections and get some of the money they need in order to bring the message and spread the message.
And when you talk about gerrymandered districts, something that I know Arnold Schwarzenegger from California, when he was the governor of California, he's been a huge proponent of this. When he's asked, what is the one thing you would change about California to make everyone's lives better? And his number one answer is, I would get rid of the gerrymandered congressional districts. And so if you could just speak more to why is that a problem and how would you fix it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the easiest fix there is independent redistricting commissions that are made up of multi-partisan folks, people from both parties, and people from independents and people from small parties. I think that the problem is that and we'll talk about it at the state delegate level, or at the state level, I think first. Democrats are able to draw the map in a way that ensures that they're going to maintain that veto-proof majority. And oftentimes that means doing these weird things where they will carve out like one part of a district to be a one-person seat and another part of a district to be a two-person seat where they're normally three-person seats. And they will do that in a way that sometimes cedes some seats to Republicans without competition, but also cedes other seats to Democrats without competition. And it's all a numbers game in order to make sure that they're above that 3/5 majority that they need to be able to override vetoes. And so they draw district lines in ways not that best represent the interest of the people in those districts, but best represent the Democratic Party's ability to maintain a veto-proof majority in both houses. You know,
yeah, we live in 6B, which is a heavily gerrymandered district, and it extended into Montgomery County for that very reason, so that the blue party could control and actually oust a long time Republican candidate, a delegate.
Yeah.
So we definitely know the results of that.
And I mean the best, easiest, could do right now solution to that is independent redistricting commissions that are multi-partisan and that bring in experts as well as citizens. You know, so oftentimes practitioners of political science in the academic world and politicians don't see eye to eye. But some of the best solutions to these type of things are when a commission includes folks that both have the academic experience and the practical political experience in order to come up with something that is better. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And there's always going to be times when people don't like the way that the district lines get drawn or don't think that it works in their interest. But if the interest is about making sure that voters have responsive electeds instead of making sure that the Democratic Party has a veto-proof majority, then I think we're going to get better districts. You know, and I guess the other part of that is I would get rid of these split. If we keep the multi-member districts, I would get rid of these split districts. These split districts are a real tool that they use to prevent folks from having to have competition in certain races.
Mm-hmm. And one way that you can really see that in action is that when you look at the delegates, so if you go to Frederick County, you have north of Frederick City, you have very conservative delegates there. And in Frederick City, you have a very liberal delegate that comes from Frederick City. But that's not the way it always was. It used to be that there was a good portion of that northern Frederick County that went down into Frederick City. And as a result, candidates had to actually kind of appeal to both parties. They had to appeal at least to their own party and independents. And so there was actually a process where moderation occurred. Whereas when it's just one party or the other, many people have noted that really it is the most extreme individuals in the primaries that have a tendency to get elected. And then when you look at the delegates in Annapolis, the laws that they pass, even from a Democratic perspective, many Democrats say, oh, that is kind of scary. But then when they go to the Senate, where the Senate, by definition, has much larger territories and can't be gerrymandered as much, the Senate stops, the Democrats in the Senate stop many of those laws. But it's because those Democrats in the Senate, they had to appeal to the independents and some portion of members of the other party to get elected. And so the extremeness of gerrymandering, I think the damage that it's caused us as a state and a country, I think you speak on it very well.
You know, and to that point, I think there's a large portion of Maryland that feels excluded. You know, we have a deeply urban environment in Maryland, but we also have a very deeply rural environment. And I think the rural folks are not feeling like their voice is being heard. You know, as a member, as the Green Party platform, how would you address the needs of both urban and the very rural sections of Maryland, making people feel like they're represented and their needs are taken care of?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, so a couple of weeks ago, I was in Cumberland. I was in Frederick. In the last month, I've been to Salisbury, Frederick, and Cumberland. And I understand that Cumberland and Salisbury are urban centers in rural areas. But at the same time, I think that traveling to those places has given me a broader perspective beyond Baltimore, Bethesda, Bowie, the sort of stuff in the middle of the state. And I think that what my point here is that corporate influence and one party rule hurts everybody. And unresponsive legislators and unresponsive delegates and senators hurt everybody. So if you are a Democrat in Cumberland, you may feel equally unheard as a Republican in Baltimore City in a lot of cases. And I think that is a result of these sort of sordid races where they've done the best they can to make sure that there isn't really actually competition amongst people who are seeking office in those places. So one of the things that I saw the Democrats do this year was pass this renewable energy bill that allows them to take away local zoning of solar farms and things like that. And while I certainly agree that we need more solar in the state of Maryland, it often feels like the blue counties are not doing their part to make sure that their buildings, their parking lots, their university buildings, all of those things have panels on them, and they're putting the burden on the rural counties. If I'm governor, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that everybody is part of the solution. We're not going to go and put solar panels all up the side of a mountain in Cumberland. We're going to go look at the buildings that are in town, and we're going to figure out what we can do to get solar panels on top of the rooftops so that those buildings can power themselves and it can give energy back to the grid. I had a great conversation in Cumberland with a young man who's in the building trades about this, and he's like, I would love it if Allegheny College had a program that taught people to do solar installation on buildings. Right now, any solar training that we get is how to build them in fields on our farmland or on our mountainsides. But if we could do it on parking lots, on buildings, on top of the prison, on top of the college, on top of all those, rooftops in downtown Cumberland, he's like, I'd be all for it, and I'd get a crew together and we would just do this. And I think that too often the Democrats in the blue counties look at the folks in Western Maryland, Northern Maryland, the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, and they say, well, they don't want any of this and they're not interested in it. And what they're not interested in is Democrats ramming something through that takes away their local autonomy to decide what they want in their community. I think people are very interested in figuring out how they can change their energy prices. People like the idea of solar for their building. They like the idea of being able to have energy autonomy and things like that. But I think that's just one example. And I think that, that example has rung with me recently because I can look around Baltimore and see all the buildings that could benefit from having solar on their rooftops and all the young people in our VOTEC programs who could learn to install that stuff and have great wage-paying jobs, but the state is not incentivizing that. They're incentivizing taking up somebody's farmland in Western Maryland or the Eastern Shore and putting these big full farms on them. And I don't think that's not the right way to go about it all the time.
But to me, not only does that take away, as you said very well, a local autonomy, but it's part of a broader issue, which is where, in general, there are numerous ways where in Annapolis, the legislature has set it up so that resources are being taken away from all of these districts. Now, we can say rural districts. I think also one way to say it is districts that don't vote for the supermajority in Annapolis. Resources are constantly, and autonomy is constantly being taken away from them.
So let me say that I am almost always against preemption of local authority, right? Like one of the key tenets of the Green Party is grassroots democracy, and that means decisions should be made at the level closest to the people. And I think that that doesn't there's a balance, of course, right? But I think for the Democrats, the balance is usually in favor of being able to preempt local action that they don't like and that does not go along with the policy agenda of the donors, national narratives, and big groups that influence them. I listen to the Mako podcast sometimes, the Conduit Street podcast, which is the Maryland Association of Counties, and they oftentimes agree with the agenda of the supermajority, but on these preemption issues, they get really upset because people have elected local authorities who say, we don't want these solar farms on our farmland, and the state is now taking the ability to say, well, we don't care what you want. Like, I would, if I'm governor and we set statewide targets, we're not balancing them all on the back of those counties. We're making Montgomery County explain how they're going to put solar on top of their buildings. We're making Montgomery County explain how they're going to use their parkland or their farmland or their preserves as well for some of that stuff in Baltimore City and Baltimore County and all those folks. Like, if it's a shared burden, it should be a shared burden, not one that is put on the folks that they don't like.
You know, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, beyond climate change, which we know is a big Green Party initiative, is there any other issues or major issues that you think that both parties, red and blue, are overlooking that the Green Party platform will address?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that I would really like to see that I think both parties don't act on is a Maryland public bank. And a public bank like they have in the state of North Dakota, which allows us to do our banking, our bonding, all of that stuff without having to pay fees to Wall Street banks. I think we just spend a lot of money sort of allowing these banks to charge us these fees for the state's banking. I also think that the public bank opens up additional funding for infrastructure projects and opens up additional funding for people who need credit but are not able to get it in the commercial banking sector. And so I would say that this is a fundamental issue that I think actually makes it a lot easier for the folks who are not necessarily in favor in Annapolis to have access to capital, to have access to credit, and to fund the transportation projects without having to pay the additional transaction fees, without having to pay the additional banking fees and things like that. I think the Bank of North Dakota is a good example of this. And they have used that bank in order to fund infrastructure projects, in order to decrease tuition at the college, in order to do a lot of things that help out everybody. And they, for them, a lot of it comes from all of the fossil fuel resources that they have help to keep the bank afloat, but they've had the bank alive for 100 years or so, and it works. It decreases the amount of money they have to spend on those fees, and it makes them less beholden to Wall Street banks.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. Elon Musk is definitely exploring the option of starting a third party. I believe that you're correct. I think that he's going to get a lot of disgruntled Republicans, Democrats, and liberals, and independents, rather, and Green Party members, I'm sure. People who don't believe that this two-party system is working for them. They don't feel represented. People want to feel represented. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? And if you're living in a place where you don't feel like people are considering your needs, wants, desires, and other options, then of course you're going to look for something else, right? So I think that Elon Musk has the potential to really upset the apple cart quite a bit.
Yeah, so the two biggest things that hold third parties back from forming and developing in the United States are money and access to media. And Elon Musk has those things. So I think he can be a game changer if he decides to. We'll see. I don't know. My sort of hope is that Elon Musk goes and finds the people who know how to do this stuff, gives them the resources they need in order to do it, and provides some executive guidance to it, but he isn't too hands-on on it. I worry a little bit that sometimes when he's super hands-on on things, he gets in his own way. And I think that, we have not seen a moment in the last 50 years where somebody with his wealth or his resources has decided that they wanted to start a third party. And so he has a real opportunity to change the system. He has a real opportunity to fund some lobbying and lawsuits that help everybody. And he has a real opportunity to take advantage of people's dissatisfaction with the two-party system and open up space for multiple folks. Now, I think Elon has a real opportunity here, and I'm not voting for Elon's party, but at the same time, I think he has a real opportunity to shake up the system and to throw a wrench in some things.
We'll see how it goes. I'm like you. I'm not saying I'm going to jump on the Elon Musk party, whatever it is, but I believe that competition is really important. When you have a supermajority, it just fosters corruption. That's just how it is.
Yeah. And so, I think the other thing about a multi-party system is it creates interesting coalitions, right? Like the only coalitions that exist right now are amongst the Democratic Party. Those are the governing coalitions. And anything that we are looking at in Annapolis about a change or a shift is within power dynamics within the Democratic Party. Republican Party can agitate, they can say stuff, they can get people elected in the districts that they're in, but they fundamentally have no power without Democrats wanting to play ball.
Yeah, you're talking about accountability. People
Yeah,
would be accountable when competition makes people accountable. And right
totally.
now, the supermajority in Maryland is blue, and there's no accountability.
The results of that kind of lack of accountability is that we are, according to the governor, headed to a 16% deficit over the next 5 years, which is completely unsustainable.
Unsustainable.
And irresponsible. I've never heard of such a thing before. And we lost our credit rating, has gotten downgraded. And I don't think that it can be associated with anything else other than the fact that one political party has not had to be accountable to, as you made the point a couple times during this conversation, Andy, to the people, but quite frankly, even to common sense. They can rewrite the laws until the system falls apart, and unfortunately, we're starting to see some of that fraying.
And to be fair, the supermajorities in the red states are equally have issues, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the red states, although some of them are run better, the truth is that same malaise attacks them as well when they have a supermajority. There's no innovation, there's no accountability, there's no need, and then ideas die is what the problem is.
Right. When you have a supermajority, the goal is to protect the supermajority, right? And so whether you're in a blue state or a red state, the supermajority is only survival instinct is to protect itself. Whereas if you are in a state where there is competition, when one party gets in power, they do good stuff that makes their voters and everybody happy. And when the other party gets in power, they do good stuff. So it's like if you compare the difference between like a Minnesota to a Maryland, right? Minnesota has a state legislature that goes back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, whereas Maryland has one that is like literally 1866, Democrats took power of the General Assembly in Maryland, and there's only been 2 sessions since 1866 when they were not, where they did not have the majority. There's good political science research that backs up the point that you're making on this, Mark, which is that supermajority states are less responsive to voters, they're less innovative, and oftentimes they're less good at solving problems that face people, whether it's blue or red. Competition is good.
I find it very, very interesting that while the Green Party has historically been associated with the liberal side of politics, there's a number of issues and statements you made this evening that actually would be more associated with the conservative side of politics. So I hope we get more into that in the future. But I want to thank you for joining us today. This is a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, Andy, I'd like to thank you too. I mean, you definitely opened my eyes. I did not really research a lot about the Green Party up till now, mostly because it is a two-party system. But you've opened my eyes to a lot of topics, and I appreciate you being here. Anything you'd like to add before we close it out?
Yeah, so thank you all so much for having me on. I really appreciated the conversation, and I'll definitely come back. And look, I mean, we are on the left side of the political spectrum, right? But we think in a multi-party system, there are some things we're going to compromise with folks who are on the center, some folks that are liberals, some folks that are on the right. And the whole problem with our system is that it does not incentivize collaboration, it does not incentivize conversation, and it does not incentivize coalitions that might shift and might be different on an issue. And so once we break that system down, and once we get to a system that is accountable to voters, yeah, we're going to say things that are probably to the left of what you and most of your listeners are saying. And I will say a lot of those things. I believe in a lot of those things, but I don't believe that those things have to be these sort of, pitched fight on every issue where sides are drawn, teams are drawn, and people just rally around their team. I think politics is about compromise and coalitions. And if we can have more voices in the conversation, we're going to get better compromises, better coalitions, better accountability, and better outcomes for everybody.
That's it for this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. Thank you to Andy Ellis, who is seeking the nomination for the Green Party for governor of the state of Maryland. My co-host, Ethan.
Yep. And thank you for joining us, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Whether you're green, red, or blue, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. We hope you got some great ideas, some good interchange, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes. That's a wrap for this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. A big thanks to Andy Ellis for joining us and sharing his vision as he seeks the Green Party nomination for governor. Whether you agreed with us, disagreed, or just enjoyed the ride, we're glad you came along. Follow us on social media, especially Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yes, Ethan's got a face for radio, but we're on video anyway. If this episode made you think, made you laugh, or made you yell at your screen, share it with a friend or an enemy. We're not picky. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and above all, stay civil.